She was humiliated when her card got declined until a billionaire stranger said she's with me. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. It happened on a chilly Thursday evening inside a small cafe tucked between two busy streets in downtown Seattle. The kind of place where the lights are warm, the pastries are overpriced, and people pretend not to stare even when they definitely are. And tonight, all eyes had silently turned toward one girl, Alyssa. She stood at the counter, cheeks burning, fingers gripping her worn-out wallet as the cashier repeated the words that felt like a punch to her ribs. Your card was declined. Again. The people in line shuffled impatiently behind her. Someone sighed loudly. Another whispered, yikes. Alyssa swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight. She had only ordered a simple latte, one small comfort after a long shift at the bookstore and an even longer commute. She tried to laugh it off, her voice cracking. Can you try it one more time? Sometimes the machine is weird. The cashier tried. Same result. Same humiliation. The screen flashed red, just like her face. Do you have another form of payment? She didn't. That was the only card she had left, the only one not maxed out. She muttered, I'm so sorry. I can step aside, but the barista had already called, next. Her stomach twisted. She backed away from the counter, staring at the floor, praying for it to swallow her whole. And then the worst part happened, people actually began to talk. Why come here if you can't afford it? She looks like she hasn't slept in days. Probably trying to get free drinks. Alyssa clenched her jaw, trying not to cry. Not here. Not in front of strangers. Not again. It wasn't her fault her hours were cut. It wasn't her fault rent had ballooned. It wasn't her fault her emergency savings had been drained by medical bills she wasn't even done paying. But life didn't care about reasons. Only results. And right now, the result was simple, she looked like a failure. Then, a voice behind her. Deep. Calm. Certain. Put it on my tab. Alyssa froze. She turned slowly. A tall man stood a few feet away, dark charcoal coat, polished shoes, cold air still clinging to him. His eyes were sharp but warm, like someone who saw everything in the room and drew his own conclusions within seconds. The cafe fell silent. The barista blinked. Sir, I said, the man repeated, softer this time, she's with me. The room seemed to shift. The whispers stopped. People stared. Alyssa's heart hammered. She didn't know him. She had never seen him before. Why was he helping her? The cashier hesitated, then nodded and rang up both drinks. The stranger stepped forward, took the receipt, and handed her the warm latte she couldn't pay for. Here, he said gently. No one should be embarrassed over a cup of coffee. Alyssa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Gratitude tangled with confusion. He offered a small smile, the kind that didn't ask for anything in return. And then, before she could speak, someone in line whispered, Is that Ethan Ward? Another voice, stunned, the tech billionaire. Alyssa's breath caught. Ethan Ward. The name she had seen on billboards, interviews, magazine covers. The face that matched the rumors, intimidatingly successful, impossibly private, almost never in places like this. She blinked, unable to process it. Why would someone like him help someone like her? But the way he looked at her, it wasn't pity. It wasn't judgment. It was something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time, respect. And that was the moment everything began to change, because a declined card was only the beginning of the story. That night, after the humiliating scene at the cafe and the unexpected intervention from Ethan Ward, Alyssa walked home with the warm latte still in her hands. The cup felt heavier than it should, almost like it carried the weight of everything she had been trying so hard to hold together. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. His voice. His calm certainty. The way everyone in the room fell silent when he said, "She is with me." She had never heard anyone say something like that to defend her. Not recently. Maybe not ever. The cold air bit at her cheeks as she made her way up the cracked steps of her small apartment building. The hallway light flickered, buzzing softly. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and let out a long breath. Her studio was barely larger than a storage unit. A single bed. A chipped table. A small window that rattled when the wind picked up. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, she felt something strange. Hope. She sat on the edge of her bed, pulled off her coat, and stared at the latte. She whispered to herself, "Why would someone like him help someone like me?" The next morning, Alyssa woke before her alarm, still thinking about him. She brushed her hair, put on her bookstore uniform, and grabbed a granola bar that would have to count as breakfast. Outside, the city was grey with early clouds. She caught the bus, walked the last few blocks, and pushed open the door to Page Turner Books, the used bookstore where she worked 20 hours a week. The bell above the door jingled as she entered. "Morning, Alyssa," her manager called without looking up from inventory sheets. "Morning," she replied, tying her apron. She spent the next few hours shelving returns, helping customers find titles, and pretending everything was normal. But inside, her thoughts were not at the bookstore. They were still standing at that cafe counter, hearing Ethan Ward's voice cut through the room. Around noon, while reorganizing the bargain shelf, she caught a reflection in the front window. A sleek black sedan parked by the curb. At first she ignored it. Cars like that belonged in other neighborhoods. Other worlds. She kept working, until the door opened and a hush fell over the shop. She turned. And froze. Ethan Ward was standing there. In her bookstore. In her world. He looked different in daylight. Less like a distant figure from a magazine cover and more like a real person, though still impossibly composed. The manager straightened immediately. "Sir, can I help you find something?" Ethan's eyes were already on Alyssa. "Actually, I am here to speak with her." The manager blinked at Alyssa, confused. Alyssa's pulse raced. Ethan stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "Alyssa," he said, his voice warm, "I hope I am not interrupting your day." She swallowed hard. "No. No, you are not. I mean, you are, but it is okay." He smiled slightly. "I came to check on you after last night. I wanted to make sure you got home safely." Alyssa stared. No one had ever gone out of their way to check on her safety. Not like this. Not with intention. She nodded slowly. I did. Thank you again. You did not have to help me." Ethan looked at her for a moment before replying. "People should not be treated the way you were treated. Not for something as simple as a declined card." She felt her cheeks warm. She tried to laugh it off. "It happens. Cards decline. Life goes on. It should not have happened like that," he said softly. Then he glanced around the bookstore, then back at her. "Alyssa, would you allow me to buy you lunch today? Just lunch. I would like to make up for what you went through." Her breath caught. People were staring. Her manager pretended not to eavesdrop but failed miserably. Alyssa hesitated, feeling the familiar tug of self-doubt. Why her? Why would someone like him want to talk to someone like her again? But something in his expression, steady, genuine, almost hopeful, told her this was not charity. It was something else. Something she did not yet understand. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Lunch would be nice. Ethan's smile deepened. Just slightly. Great. There is a small place around the corner. I think you will like it. As they stepped outside together, Alyssa felt the strange, tingling sense that she was walking into a world she had never imagined belonging to. And deep inside, a small voice whispered that her life was about to change in ways she could not yet see. The moment Alyssa stepped out of the bookstore beside Ethan Ward, the air felt different, almost charged, as if the city itself paused to watch them. She kept her eyes on the sidewalk, trying not to look as nervous as she felt, but her heart thudded loudly in her chest, reminding her that this was not normal. People like him did not walk around with people like her. Ethan guided her toward a quiet corner café, one far less crowded than the place where everything had gone wrong the night before. When they stepped inside, the smell of warm bread and roasted coffee beans wrapped around them. The hostess looked up, ready to greet them, but her eyes widened for a split second when she saw who had just walked in. "Table for two, please," Ethan said politely, and she immediately led them to a private booth near the window. Alyssa slid into the seat, still unsure of what to do with her hands, what to say, or how to breathe normally. Ethan sat across from her, his posture relaxed but attentive, as if he genuinely wanted to know who she was. When the menus arrived, Alyssa stared at the prices and immediately felt her stomach tighten. $12 for soup. $14 for a sandwich. She lowered the menu slowly and whispered, "I am not very hungry." Ethan looked up, reading her expression instantly. He closed his menu. "Alyssa, I invited you. Order what you want. Please." His voice was gentle, not pushing, not pitying. She exhaled softly and nodded. The waiter came, took their order, and disappeared, leaving the two of them with the soft hum of cafe chatter around them. For a moment, neither spoke. Alyssa stared at her hands, her fingers tracing the edge of her napkin. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" She met his eyes. "Sure. Last night, when your card was declined, you looked more hurt than embarrassed. It felt like there was more behind it." The question hit deeper than she expected. She looked down again, her voice barely above a whisper. "It has been a tough year. Rent keeps going up. My hours were cut. My mother was sick and I had to cover most of her bills. And now that she is gone, I am still drowning in the debt." Ethan's face softened. "I am sorry, Alyssa. That is a lot for one person to carry." She shrugged, blinking away the sting in her eyes. "It is life. A lot of people have it worse. I am just trying to keep my head above water." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "You should not have to go through that alone." She gave him a small, tired smile. "Everybody goes through things alone eventually." Their food arrived, breaking the heavy moment. Alyssa took a sip of her soup, surprised at how warm and comforting it tasted. It had been a long time since she had eaten something that was not canned or discounted. Ethan watched her with a quiet, steady interest, as if every small reaction mattered. After a few minutes, he asked, "Do you like working at the bookstore?" Alyssa hesitated. "I love books. I like helping people find what they are looking for. But the pay is, well, you can imagine. And what would you do if money was not an issue?" She froze. No one had ever asked her that. Not seriously. Not with intent. She swallowed. "I would write. I used to write short stories. I even won a small contest in high school. But life gets busy." Ethan's eyes warmed. "Then you should write again." She let out a soft laugh. "It is not that simple." "Maybe it can be," Ethan replied. His tone carried something she could not quite decipher. Curiosity? Admiration? Something else? As the lunch went on, she found herself talking more than she expected. About her dreams. Her fears. Her past. And Ethan listened to every word, not like a billionaire entertaining a stranger, but like a human being genuinely wanting to understand another. When they finally stepped outside again, sunlight peeked through the clouds, casting a faint glow across the street. Alyssa pulled her coat tighter, suddenly aware that she would have to return to the bookstore, return to her life, return to everything she had tried so hard to manage alone. Ethan looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "Alyssa, I know this may sound forward, but would you mind if I saw you again?" Her breath caught. She could barely process the question. "You want to see me again?" "Yes," he said simply. "I do." She nodded slowly, still stunned. "I would like that." As she walked back toward the bookstore, she did not look over her shoulder. She did not need to. Ethan Ward stayed standing on the sidewalk, watching her with an expression that looked a lot like a beginning. For the next few days, Alyssa moved through her routine with a quiet kind of disbelief, as if the world had shifted under her feet but she was the only one who knew it. She spent her mornings shelving books, her afternoons helping customers, and her evenings replaying every moment from that lunch with Ethan Ward. The way he listened. The way he saw her. The way he said he wanted to see her again. She told no one, not even her co-workers, because it felt fragile, like a small flame she was scared to breathe on too hard. But on Friday afternoon, just as she finished rearranging a table of new arrivals, the bookstore bell chimed again, and she felt the same ripple in the air that she had felt before. Ethan stepped inside, dressed in a simple sweater and dark jeans, looking far too out of place and yet perfectly calm. Her manager almost tripped over a stack of books trying to stand straighter. Alyssa froze for half a second, then forced herself to smile. "Hi," she said, hoping her voice did not sound as breathless as she felt. "Hi, Alyssa," he replied, his expression softening in that way she was slowly learning meant he was genuinely glad to see her. "Are you free after your shift today?" Her heart skipped. "I am off in 15 minutes. "Perfect," he said. "There is something I want to show you." 15 minutes later, Alyssa stepped outside with him, pulling her coat tighter as a cold breeze swept down the street. "Where are we going?" she asked cautiously. Ethan offered a small smile. "Not far. I promise." A sleek black sedan pulled up, but before she could panic, he gestured toward it. "It is just a ride. Nothing more." Inside the car, Alyssa stared out the window as the city blurred past. Her nerves twisted in knots, not from fear but from the strange feeling that her life was slowly bending in a direction she had never dared imagine. After a short drive, the car stopped in front of a large glass building downtown. The lobby was bright, polished, and busy, with people in tailored suits moving briskly through the space. Alyssa blinked. "Ethan, where are we?" "My headquarters," he said casually. Her stomach dropped. She turned to him, eyes wide. "You're what?" "Ward Technologies," he added. "This is where I work." "Work?" As if that word could possibly cover the empire he ran. She stepped inside with him, feeling painfully aware of her thrifted coat and scuffed shoes. The receptionist looked up and immediately straightened. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ward." Ethan nodded politely, then turned to Alyssa. "Come on. There is something upstairs you should see." The elevator ride felt surreal, almost too quiet. When the doors opened, they stepped into a floor lined with glass-partitioned meeting rooms. Modern artwork, and a long hallway leading to a space filled with bright screens and large windows overlooking the city. But it was not the view that made Alyssa stop. It was a smaller room at the end of the hall, behind a half-open door. Inside, there was a long wooden table covered in notebooks, printed manuscripts, and stacks of short stories. She frowned. "What is this?" Ethan stepped beside her. "This is the Creative Incubator," he said gently. "It is a program I fund for new writers. People with talent, but not opportunities. People who need support, structure, and guidance to pursue their voice." She stared at the papers again, then back at him. "Why are you showing me this?" For the first time, Ethan looked hesitant, almost vulnerable. "Because I think you belong here." Her breath caught. "Ethan." I am not a writer. Not anymore. You are, he said quietly. You just pushed it aside because life got too heavy. But your dreams matter, Alyssa. She shook her head, overwhelmed. Ethan, I work at a bookstore for minimum wage. I do not have a degree in literature. I have debt. I do not belong in a place like this. He stepped closer, his voice calm and steady. You belong anywhere your talent takes you. And I want to help you get there. She felt her throat tighten, emotions pressing hard against her ribs. No one had ever spoken to her that way. No one had ever believed she could be more than the struggle she lived in. She whispered, "Why me?" Ethan held her gaze with a sincerity that made her heart stop. Because you have a voice worth hearing. Because you deserve a chance. And because helping you feels like the first meaningful thing I have done in a long time. Alyssa stood there in silence, realizing that this moment, more than anything, felt like the beginning of a door opening inside her life, a door she had never expected to find. For a long moment, Alyssa just stood there in the Creative Incubator room, surrounded by stacks of notebooks and printed manuscripts, feeling as if she had stepped into a life that did not belong to her. Her pulse thudded in her ears, and the weight of Ethan's words lingered in the air like something delicate and dangerous. She whispered, "Ethan, I appreciate this, but I do not want to take someone else's spot. Someone who deserves it." He shook his head gently. "Alyssa, this program exists for people exactly like you. People who have something to say but no safe place to grow it. It is not charity. It is opportunity. And I would never offer it if I did not believe you were meant for it." She swallowed, her throat tight. "But why me?" Ethan's expression softened even more. "Because when I listened to you talk about writing, your voice changed. It had life. Most people talk about dreams like they are old souvenirs. But you spoke about yours like it is still alive, waiting for you to come back for it." Her eyes stung, but she blinked the emotion away, afraid of letting anything slip in front of him. Before she could answer, a knock sounded at the door. A woman in a navy suit stepped inside. "Mr. Ward, the board meeting is ready. They are waiting in the conference room." Ethan nodded. "Thank you, Melissa. I will be there shortly." The woman left, but not before giving Alyssa a curious look, the kind that said she was trying to figure out why Ethan Ward, the man known for being cold, distant, and always all business, was standing in a room with a girl from a bookstore. As soon as she disappeared, Ethan turned back to Alyssa. "I have to attend this meeting, but I want you to stay here for a moment. Look around. Read a few pages. Feel the space. Then tell me what you think." Alyssa let out a shaky breath. "Ethan, I do not know what to say." "Then do not say anything yet," he replied softly. "Just consider the possibility that you are capable of more than survival. That you deserve more than scraping by. Consider that you could truly create something." With that, he offered a small, reassuring smile and stepped out, leaving her alone in the room that suddenly felt too large, too bright, too full of hope for someone like her. Alyssa walked slowly around the table, tracing her fingers over the edges of notebooks and printed pages. Each one represented someone's voice, someone's leap of faith, someone brave enough to believe in themselves. And she wondered, quietly, painfully, if she had ever been brave like that. She picked up a manuscript and flipped through the first few pages. The writing was raw, unpolished, but honest, and it made her chest ache. She imagined her own words on a page like this. Her name printed in the corner. Her stories breathing in the hands of someone who understood them. The thought terrified her. It also pulled her forward like a thread she could not resist. After several minutes, she returned to the window and stared out at the city below. Cars moved like tiny beads of light. People hurried along sidewalks. The world kept flowing, indifferent and unstoppable. But somewhere inside her, something was shifting, waking up again. She whispered to herself, "Do I really belong here?" A voice behind her answered, "Yes. You do." Alyssa spun around, startled to see Ethan standing in the doorway again. His meeting must have ended quickly, or he had left early. Either way, he looked almost relieved to see her still there. She shook her head. I am scared. Of what? Of failing. Of embarrassing myself. Of proving that I am not enough. Ethan stepped closer, his gaze steady and warm. Everyone is afraid of those things. Even me. Especially me. But fear does not decide your worth. You do. She inhaled shakily, wanting to believe him. What if I try, and it does not work? He smiled, not the confident billionaire smile she had seen online, but a softer, human one. Then we try again. And again. Until it does. You do not have to do it alone, Alyssa. Her heart pounded. The room felt different now, not overwhelming but possible. He extended his hand slightly, not touching her, just offering space for her to step forward if she chose. So, he asked gently, are you willing to take the first step? Alyssa stared at him, at the man who had walked into her life through a moment of pure humiliation and turned it into something she never imagined she would be invited into. She exhaled slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I think? I want to try. And the way Ethan's eyes lit up told her that this moment, right here, was going to change everything. Over the next week, Alyssa's life shifted in small but undeniable ways, the kind that did not shout but whispered, pulling her toward something she had once believed existed only for other people. Each afternoon after her shift at the bookstore, she took the bus downtown and walked into Ward Technologies with a nervous flutter in her chest, wondering if today would be the day someone stopped her and said she did not belong there. But no one ever did. Instead, the receptionist began greeting her by name, the elevator attendant smiled politely, and the employees, even those in sharp suits and confident strides, offered her respectful nods whenever they passed. And every time she stepped into the Creative Incubator, she felt that same fragile but growing spark, the one Ethan had urged her to pay attention to. He joined her there whenever he could, often appearing in the doorway after a meeting, loosening the collar of his dress shirt, looking exhausted but somehow lighter when his eyes landed on her. How is it going? He would ask, his voice warm. And Alyssa, still surprised by how much she wanted to tell him everything, always answered honestly. One evening after reading over a few pages of her writing, Ethan leaned over the table and said, Alyssa, you have a clear voice. You write like someone who sees the world deeply. She felt her cheeks heat. I write like someone who is still figuring things out. Exactly, he replied. That is what makes it real. As the days passed, Alyssa began writing again. First only a few sentences. Then a paragraph. Then a full page. She sat by the tall windows of the incubator, watching the sun set over the city as words slowly returned to her like old friends she had been too ashamed to call. But outside of that room, life was not all gentle encouragement and quiet progress. Some things were harder. One evening, when she returned home after another long session of writing, she found an envelope taped to her apartment door. Inside was a rent increase notice, abrupt and steep, far beyond what she could afford. Alyssa stared at the paper, a sinking weight settling inside her. She spent the night calculating and recalculating her budget, but no matter how she twisted the numbers, the math refused to bend in her favor. The next day, even though she tried to hide it, Ethan noticed the heaviness around her the moment she walked into the incubator. You look like something is weighing on you, he said gently. Alyssa shook her head. It is nothing. Just life. Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady and quiet. Alyssa, if something is wrong, I want to know. She hesitated, then handed him the notice. He read it, his jaw tightening, a flicker of anger in his eyes. This is unreasonable, he said. They cannot just raise your rent like this without warning. She shrugged hopelessly. They can and they did. Then you should not stay there. She let out a tired laugh. I cannot afford to live anywhere else. Ethan paused for a long moment, as if weighing something in his mind. Alyssa, would you let me help? Her heart clenched. Ethan, no. I cannot accept money from you. That feels like crossing a line. I am not offering money, he said softly. I am offering stability. My company owns several residential units for employee housing. They are meant for people who need a safe place while they rebuild. You would not owe anything. It would just give you space to breathe. She stared at him, stunned. You want me to live in one of your buildings? I want you to have a place where you can sleep without worrying you will lose everything overnight. She looked away, torn. Accepting his help felt dangerous, like stepping onto ground that could shift beneath her. But refusing it meant staying trapped in a cycle that had already drained her for too long. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. I do not want you to think I am with you because I need help. Ethan's expression softened instantly. Alyssa, if I thought that, I would not offer. I know you are with me because you choose to be, not because you need anything from me. Her breath trembled. The vulnerability in his voice left her momentarily speechless. After a long pause, she whispered, maybe I could see the place. Ethan smiled gently, relief washing through his features. I would like that. And in that moment, Alyssa realized something she had been trying not to admit. This connection between them was no longer something accidental or fragile. It was becoming real, and the truth was quietly, steadily undeniable. Ethan Ward was no longer just the stranger who had rescued her from humiliation. He was becoming the person who made her believe that her life could hold more than struggle. He was becoming someone she might be afraid to lose. The following afternoon, Ethan drove Alyssa to the residential building he had mentioned, a quiet, well-kept place on a tree-lined street just a few blocks from his headquarters. The moment she stepped out of the car, Alyssa felt the familiar mix of awe and anxiety twist inside her chest. The entrance lobby was warm and bright, with soft lighting and clean polished floors. It looked nothing like the dim, drafty hallway of her old apartment. As they stepped inside, the concierge greeted Ethan with a respectful nod and then looked curiously at Alyssa, as if trying to place who she might be. Ethan kept his voice calm and polite. We are here to view one of the company units. The concierge handed him a key, and Alyssa followed him toward the elevator, feeling suddenly small in her worn coat. When the doors opened onto the 7th floor, the hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint and lemon cleaner. Ethan stopped at a door near the end and unlocked it before stepping aside for her to enter first. The apartment was simple but beautiful, with large windows overlooking the city, hardwood floors, and a small but clean kitchen. Sunlight spilled across the room in soft golden bands. Alyssa took a slow breath as she walked farther inside. Ethan, she whispered, this is too much. He leaned lightly against the doorway, watching her with a gentle expression that made her chest tighten. It is not too much. It is what you deserve. A safe place. A quiet place. A place where you can work on your writing without worrying about eviction notices. She turned to him, overwhelmed. I cannot just move into something like this. It feels like I am taking advantage. You are not, he said firmly. Every unit here exists for situations exactly like yours. Employees rebuilding. People who need a transition. You would not owe me anything. She looked down at her hands, her voice cracking. I am afraid that accepting this means crossing a line. Ethan stepped closer, not touching her, but enough that she could feel the sincerity radiating from him. Alyssa, your independence matters to you. I know that. And it is one of the things I admire the most. But independence does not mean suffering alone. Allowing someone to help you does not make you weak. Her throat tightened. No one had ever said something like that to her. Not in a way that felt safe. She murmured, I do not want to lose myself. You will not, Ethan said softly. And I will never ask you to. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The apartment felt too quiet, too intimate. Alyssa took a slow breath and let her gaze wander around the room again. She could imagine a small desk by the window. A place to write. A place to breathe. A place to begin again. But just as that fragile hope began to settle, her phone buzzed sharply in her pocket. She pulled it out and froze at the sight of the name on the screen. Her landlord. Against her better judgment, she answered. His voice came through loud and rude. Alyssa, if you are not out by the end of the week, I am clearing the unit myself. You are already late. I am not waiting. Alyssa felt her stomach twist painfully. You said I had until next month. I changed my mind. End of the week. No excuses. The call ended abruptly. Alyssa stood there trembling. Ethan had heard enough of the tone to know something was wrong. What happened? She forced a shaky breath. He is kicking me out by the end of the week. He does not care. He never cared. Ethan's eyebrows pulled together, anger flickering in his eyes. That is not legal. He cannot just, he can, she whispered. He always does. She sank onto the edge of the sofa, overwhelmed by fear and shame. I do not want to be someone who needs rescuing all the time. Ethan moved closer, lowering himself to her level. You are not someone who needs rescuing. You are someone who has had too much weight placed on your shoulders for too long. She blinked back tears. I do not know what to do. Then let me help, he said quietly. This apartment is ready for you. You can move in today if you want. Or tomorrow. Whenever you are ready. Alyssa looked up at him, searching his eyes for judgment and finding none. Only patience. Only care. Only a steady truth she could not deny anymore. I do not want you to think I am choosing you because I need a place to live, she said softly. Ethan shook his head. Alyssa, what I think is simple. I think you are choosing to fight for a better life. The rest, we can navigate together. She exhaled slowly, her voice barely audible. Then maybe I can accept this. Just this once. Ethan smiled gently, the kind of smile that warmed the whole room. Alyssa, it is not just once. It is a step. And I am here for all the steps after it, too. And as she stood in the middle of that small, sunlit apartment, Alyssa realized that the fear inside her was not about accepting help. It was about accepting that someone truly cared. And caring, she realized, was far more frightening than being alone. For the rest of that week, Alyssa moved through her days with a quiet determination that surprised even her. She packed her belongings into a few worn boxes, cleared her shelves at the bookstore during her breaks, and tried to keep her hands from trembling each time she remembered her landlord's voice threatening to throw her things out. But this time, she was not going through it alone. Ethan checked on her every evening, sometimes stopping by the bookstore with a warm drink, other times calling just to ask if she had eaten. He never pushed, he never hovered. He simply showed up in a quiet, steady way that made her feel seen without feeling cornered. On Saturday morning, she stood in her old apartment for the last time, staring at the bare walls and the stains on the carpet, realizing how much she had endured here. Every winter draft. Every late notice. Every night she had cried into her pillow, praying for one day of peace. Ethan arrived a few minutes later, dressed casually, carrying an extra box just in case she needed it. You ready? He asked gently. Alyssa nodded even though her chest felt tight. As ready as I will ever be. Together they loaded her boxes into his car. It took less than 15 minutes, a reminder of how little she truly owned. When she closed the apartment door behind her, she half expected to feel ashamed, but instead, she felt strangely free, like she was stepping out of a weight she had carried for far too long. At the new apartment, Ethan helped her bring everything inside. He watched quietly as she set her few belongings down, then turned to him with a small, uncertain smile. It feels unreal, she confessed. Like I will wake up tomorrow and find a notice taped to the door. Ethan shook his head softly. There will be no notices here. This place is yours for as long as you need it. She swallowed hard, touched deeply by his certainty. As they unpacked, Alyssa found herself opening up more than she expected. She told him about her mother's illness, the night she had gone into debt trying to save her, the exhaustion that had become her shadow for months. She told him how the bookstore had been her refuge and how writing had once been her dream before life had pushed it into the dark. Ethan listened without interrupting, without judgment, with a quiet empathy that felt rare and almost sacred. When she finished, he spoke softly. "You have carried so much alone for so long. You are allowed to share the weight now." Alyssa looked down at her hands, fighting the rising emotion in her voice. "I am afraid that if I lean on you too much, I will lose myself." Ethan stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the sincerity in his presence. "You do not have to lean on me. You can stand beside me. There is a difference." His words settled inside her like a steady flame. Later in the evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, he took her to the rooftop of the building. The view stretched across the city, glittering with lights that shimmered against the darkening sky. Alyssa leaned against the railing, taking a deep breath of the crisp air. "I have never seen the city from up this high," she said. "It feels like another world." Ethan stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "When I first started my company, I used to come to rooftops like this to remind myself that life is bigger than fear. Bigger than mistakes. Bigger than the past." She turned to him. "What about now?" His eyes met hers with quiet honesty. "Now I come up here to understand the things I do not want to lose." Her heart skipped, the meaning in his words settling over her like a soft warmth she did not know how to accept. Or how to refuse. She held his gaze for a long moment, neither of them speaking. The city lights reflected in his eyes, and for the first time since she met him, she felt the truth she had been denying rising to the surface. She was starting to care for him. Deeply. And that scared her more than any eviction notice ever could. Ethan seemed to sense the shift and offered a small, reassuring smile. "Alyssa, whatever you are feeling, you do not have to rush it. We move at your pace. Always." She exhaled, grateful for the gentleness in his voice. "I just do not want to disappoint you." "You could not," he said quietly. "Not even if you tried." She looked out over the city again, her heart beating too loudly, her thoughts tangled. But underneath it all was a growing certainty that no longer felt fragile. This was not accidental. This was not charity. This was connection, slowly taking root. And as they stood on that rooftop together, Alyssa realized that whatever happened next, she was stepping into a chapter she had once been too afraid to write. A chapter where she was no longer surviving alone, but beginning to believe in something almost terrifying, and beautifully new. In the days that followed, Alyssa found herself settling slowly into a life she had never expected to touch, much less inhabit. Her new apartment became a sanctuary, a place where she could breathe without listening for footsteps in the hallway or fearing the sudden slam of a landlord's fist on her door. Each morning she woke to sunlight drifting across clean floors, and each evening she sat by the window with her notebook open, letting words flow again in ways she thought she had lost forever. And Ethan, he was there in quiet, steady ways. He checked on her only when she invited it, never pushing, never assuming, never treating her like someone fragile even though he understood her wounds more deeply than anyone ever had. One late afternoon, about 2 weeks after she moved in, Ethan invited her to a small gathering at his headquarters, a casual event meant to highlight the Creative Incubator's achievements and welcome new voices. Alyssa almost declined, her nerves twisting, but something inside her urged her to try. To show up. To step into the version of herself that was beginning to emerge from the shadows. When they walked in together, conversations paused for a moment, surprised eyes turning toward them. Alyssa felt her breath catch, but Ethan leaned in slightly and whispered, "You belong here. Do not forget that." His words grounded her. The evening unfolded gently, with people asking her about her writing and congratulating her on joining the program. She answered shyly at first, then with growing confidence as she realized no one was judging her. They were welcoming her. Supporting her. Seeing her. Near the end of the event, a senior editor from a partnering publishing house approached her. "I read the sample you submitted," the woman said, smiling warmly. "You have a compelling voice. I think you should consider expanding it into a full piece. There is something genuine there. Alyssa almost forgot how to speak. Me? A full piece? Yes, the editor said simply. You have something worth developing. Ethan watched from a few steps away, pride softening his features. When the editor walked off, Alyssa turned to him with disbelief in her eyes. Did you do that? She whispered. Ethan shook his head. No. You did. You wrote something worth noticing. I simply gave you the space to let it breathe. A warm rush spread through her chest, equal parts gratitude and something deeper, something that frightened her with its sincerity. Later that evening, as they rode the elevator down to the lobby, silence settled between them, gentle but charged. When the doors opened, Alyssa stepped out and turned to him. Ethan, she said softly, why did you help me? Really? He held her gaze, his voice quiet and earnest. Because the moment I met you, I saw someone fighting alone in a world that had not been kind. I saw strength disguised as struggle. And I saw a future you had convinced yourself you did not deserve. Her breath trembled. And what do you see now? Ethan took one careful step closer. Now I see someone who is finally stepping into who she was meant to be. Someone who inspires me more than I know how to explain. The lobby lights reflected in his eyes, warm and unwavering. Alyssa felt her heart open in a way she had not allowed in years. She whispered, I am scared. So am I, he admitted softly. But being scared does not mean we walk away. For a long moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, standing in the quiet glow of a building that had been a turning point for both their lives. Finally, Alyssa took a slow, brave breath. Ethan, would you like to come up? Not for dinner. Not for anything grand. Just to talk. His smile was gentle, genuine, filled with something that felt like promise. I would like that very much. And as they walked toward the door together, Alyssa realized that the life she once feared she would never escape had led her to a moment she never believed she could touch. A moment not built on rescue, or debt, or chance, but on choice. On hope. And on the quiet, transformative truth that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of everything.